Alright, everyone, welcome to the sixth podcast, I think, here at One Semester 50 Films. And today I'm really privileged to have with me Dr. Lee Hyun Jong. And perhaps, Dr. Lee, you can talk a bit about yourself and what you specialize in.
I'm Hyun Jong, and I'm originally from South Korea. And it's been 2 years since I began my teaching here at NTU, English division. My field of study is performing arts, performance studies, and also I take cultural studies as my approach for research.
The reason why I asked Dr. Lee to do this podcast was because Farewell, My Concubine, which is the movie that we're going to talk about, is featured in one of her courses in East Asian literature. Perhaps you can explain why.
Okay, well, Farewell, My Concubine is, I would say it's one of the most representative films of the fifth generation directors. There are a long list of directors like Zhang Yimou, Tian Zhangzang, and also Chen Kaige is one of the remarkable directors on that list. And the reason why I added Farewell, My Concubine to the East Asian literature class is because of its depiction of Beijing opera, or because of its depiction of traditional Asian theater. And I wonder if I don't know if you can remember, but before looking at Farewell, My Concubine, we watched another film called Sop, right? Yeah. Which also deals with this, degenerating old Korean performing art called pansori. And that film also came out in the same year as Farewell, My Concubine. I think it was 1993. And also the director of Sop is considered as one of the auteurs of Korean film. So the original purpose for me was to compare the two films in terms of the way they depict this old, archaic, traditional performing arts.
When it comes to performing arts, how do you feel about performing arts like theater and traditional music genres being brought into this newer genre of film? Like, do you think that there's something that is lost when that is done, when it's brought into this, or does it add something new?
Well, no, the focus here is, for me, it's the focus is not to lament or cry over this lost past. That's not my interest. When we talk about Asian culture right now, when we're talking about contemporary Asian society, we're not talking about like tea ceremonies anymore. The traditional past is already gone, and that's fact. So I'm not trying to cling over whether that part of the history is contaminated or not. That's not the point. The point here for me is to how these new medium, in this context we're talking about film, right, which is a new newer medium. So my focus basically is to see how one can translate or express or represent the traditional component into something new. Of course, the outcomes would be different, but what I'm interested at is to see how the methods differ and how the consequent receptions might differ.
So we're talking about how this film is, to you, is representative of Beijing opera, as well as a classic of the fifth generation filmmakers that deal with the Cultural Revolution mainly, and their thoughts and their feelings about it. And so do you think that by portraying Beijing opera, it really did capture some of the issues that arose during the Cultural Revolution, the turmoil during that period? For you, did it portray it well? As opposed to maybe say if they didn't use this performing arts and instead they chose to focus maybe with Tian Zhangzhang, he does a more personal approach, his personal lives instead of one artistic form.
For me, I think Farewell, My Concubine is also, if one can look at it in a different way, I think this is also something very personal if we consider some aspect of Chen Kaige's past, right? I can't remember this correctly, but Chen Kaige was was also one of the Red Guards during the period. And he had, I mean, I think it's written in his autobiography or something, but he had this tragic experience when he had to publicly insult his father, right, because of because of the pressure. Is that right? I think I can't.
Yeah, I think it was like some self-correction thing.
Right. He had to publicly denounce his father. So I do see Farewell My Concubine as something very personal, and not just something very self-indulgent. But I think the beauty of the film is the way how the director, kind of combined the personal to public by using the medium of Beijing opera, and I think he did that very smartly. And a couple of things that I might want to add to this is that the director subverts certain aspects of Chinese cultural tradition, right, and also Chinese modern official history through feelings of guilt and rational criticism. And I think the position he maintains there, I think he combines his subjective point of view as well as his objectivity in a well-balanced manner. He is not crying over the past, and at the same time, he's not being too cold about it at the same time. So I think that's really the merit.
So you're saying that at the same time, while it is personal, there's also a sense of detachment from it as well?
Yeah.
Is there like a particular scene or a few scenes that, you think brings this out?
There is one and the only scene in the film, which is the confession scene towards the end of the film. All these actors of the Beijing opera group get denounced in front of the Red Guard, so they are made to burn all their costumes, props. The main characters, Jushan, Xiaolu, and Da, they're made to confess each other's shame. And I think that's the very scene where the public and the private converges. That scene really carries Chen Kaige's guilt about his father, which is something very personal. I think that feelings of guilt is very much embedded in the scene. And at the same time, it has something to say about the Chinese modern history, which is the Cultural Revolution. And he frankly exposes the follies of political order and its drastic effect on people's lives. Chen Kaige condemns the society and history's manipulation of figures like Jushan, the prostitute, and at the same time he charges against the folly of quote-unquote civilization that brutally dismantles this kind of condition. The important aspect of that particular scene is the way in which the film transforms the theme of social banishment into a narrative of tragic human misunderstanding. That one scene carries a whole lot of things. It carries the history, the historical shame, personal guilt, and more, something very universal about the tragedy of human misunderstanding. Inside themselves, they know that they're doing wrong, but they're made to do it, and also they're kind of carried away by the stream of history, and they can't really do anything about it. And I think that film captures that kind of dilemma in an artistic way.
When you're talking about being carried away by history and stuff, I think when you look at the protagonist and Da, this movie not only captures the Cultural Revolution, but also the Japanese occupation and all that, and he's really trying to hang on to this, despite all the changes. For those who are listening, they probably don't know about Sopyeon-jae, but in Sopyeon-jae, there's also this character who is very consumed by his art form, and in a sense, Dae is also like that. He's, as his senior called him, he says that, for me this is just an act, but for you it's your life. Performing arts as being portrayed as something that is all-consuming. What do you think of that?
Like, are you talking about the main character in Sopyeon-jae? The guy?
The guy, yeah.
Yubong, the master?
Yeah.
Okay, and Da, who is, like, again, another kind of related character, like who stakes his life for this old performing art, right? So and your question is about how
do you see the similarity, or do you think it's kind of portrayed differently?
Well, I think but one thing you might want to be careful is that these characters are just characters. They're not real people. Within the frame of the fiction, I don't think they are consuming the traditional performing art, but that they are both portrayed as someone who strongly embody themselves into the form of art. So it's like a way of, a typical way of showing a true artist like Beethoven, right? It's a way of showing that character, and we are doing the active consumption. So I think you might want to see the difference there. We are kind of consuming that kind of nostalgia. The nostalgia part is really the similar middle ground between Seopyeonjae and Farewell My Concubine. Both films, both directors kind of know that the viewers are made to consume the past. In our reality, in our current reality, we are not living with Beijing Opera or with Pansori, because that past cannot be resumed in the same way. If one goes to see a performance of Pansori, it's not going to be the same as in the past. So anyway, it's going to be an act of consumption. The experience, the act of going to a theater to watch this, it's entirely different from the way the old people went to the town and see the performance, right? I think the way Chen Kaiga portrays Beijing opera through characters like BA, I think it's much more rational compared to how Im Kwon-taek portrays Pansori through Yubong. I was kind of uncomfortable with the way Im Kwon-taek, I don't know if he really clings on to Pansori, but the way he clings on to this, this old performing art, it's Pansori there, but I think it's too much. It's much too emotional. I don't know how to describe, but he takes the component of Pansori off from the actual historical context, and I didn't like the way he sort of manipulates the area of traditional art in that kind of manner. But here, in Farewell My Concubine, I like the way he treated the tradition in the ground of serious cultural and political self-reflection for the viewers. There are some elements of personal sentiment vis-a-vis the Beijing opera or the old tradition, but I like the way the director maintained the space for self-reflection in contrast to the way Im Kwon-taek portrayed Pansori.
If I'm not wrong, is it something like for Im Kwon-taek's movie, it's more it's pulled away from a lot of the actual events that are happening. I'm not sure if you mentioned that, whereas Farewell My Concubine is very much in the action, and you can see how the events affect them and affect the characters.
Exactly. In Seopyeonjae, there are some historical reference as part of the background, but still it's very vaguely portrayed. The only thing the audience can do is just to guess. Okay, maybe this is like somewhere between the colonial, the colonial period, the latter part of the colonial period and the Korean War. But there is this vague sense of the historical context running, right, as part of the setting, but it's not accurate. And the character's action vis-a-vis the Pansori as well as the main plot doesn't really have to do with that particular historical background. Of course, they are affected by the changes within the society and the historical framework, but still it's not as strong as it is portrayed in Farewell My Concubine.
Okay. So, just like to thank Dr. Lee once again, and be sure to listen to the next podcast.